Hey, how are you? Kumusta po kayo? And thanks for tuning in to another edition of Paul Presents Art. So I'm Paul and I'm going to be your guide today. And today we're just outside the Catriona Jeffries Gallery here in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, which is of course built on the ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And we are momentarily going to go inside the gallery to have a look at an exhibition by Montreal-based artist Valérie Blass. So Valerie, as I mentioned, is from Montreal. She's French Canadian, and she is a mid-career artist, and she shows mostly sculptures, assemblages, as well as some wall works. So we're gonna go inside the gallery. I'll tell you a little bit more about the artist as we go in. So I hope you enjoy the video, and here we go. So we're just outside the Catriona Jeffries Gallery. This is actually like I guess the landing or the terrace or something, but it's gonna turn around and this is the entrance to the gallery. We're gonna go inside and experience the world of Valérie Blass. As is customary in my videos, I'm just gonna go and do a bit of a pan of the video, and then what we'll do is I'm gonna go and read to you a bit from the brochure because the brochure is really fantastic. If you're in the gallery, you should take one of these brochures right over there. It'll tell you all about the show. So the gallery actually is comprised of two galleries, a bigger one and a smaller gallery. We're going to concentrate on the bigger gallery where Valerie's work is actually being shown. There are only 9 pieces in the show. And that's terrific because we can go and concentrate on each and every one of them. And then at the end, maybe I'll even give you my opinion about the work. So I'm just going to read from the brochure with regards to Valerie, a bit of a biography. So here we go. Valérie Blass is from Montreal and lives and works there. Is an artist whose sculptural language plays with traditional and contemporary materials, techniques, and tropes. Her set-like installations and assemblages frequently made of found objects and textiles alongside plaster, fimo, marble, and wood to create sculptures that evoke absent human bodies. Present only through frozen garments, distorted utensils, and occasional photos, the figure is both elusive and distorted throughout her work. So the first work is this work. It is titled Voir les signaux faibles, or See Weak Signals, which is made from wood polymer clay. And it's quite a large piece of work. From afar, I thought it might look like a hockey stick or something like that. Like she's from, Canadians are very much fascinated and very involved in the world of hockey. So that's kind of like the first thing that kind of like made me look at this. And then it's gonna go in a little bit closer to it. And first time I had encountered Valérie Blass's work was many years ago, back in 2010, when I was doing a residency at the Darling Foundry, which is in Montreal. I was there for a few months, and her boyfriend at the time was actually working at the Darling Foundry. And then she would actually come in and sort of like make an appearance. At the time, her reputation in the Canadian art world is just beginning, but now it's kind of like, it's more like national and international representation. This is the second piece of the work in the work. It's called Le Retour du Bâton, Malleus Maleficarum, The Cycle of the Mallet, Malleus Maleficarum, 2024. And these are wooden mallets. Now, I did a bit of a Google search, and Malleus, or Malleus Maleficarum, translates to hammer of witches, or mallets of witches, which is actually a book that was authored by a German guy back in the 15th century. I think it was around 1480s. And during that time, of course, the church was all powerful and a lot of witches are being burned. So this was sort of like a treatise in terms of how to sort of like deal with people or women, particularly, who are actually condemned of witchcraft or demonology. So that's what Malleus Maleficarum is. I'm going to put a little bit of information down in the video just for your edification. This is a very tiny piece. It's called La Sculpture de ma Mère, my mother's sculpture, circa 1960. It's a carved brick. And this is probably the oldest piece here. And there's a certain sense of domesticity that you're going to find in the entire installation of a lot of the work in this show. That's what I'm finding. A lot more personal effects are actually being put into the show and into the sculptures and assemblages. And this is On ne peut pas toucher l'unité, va falloir rajouter ou retrancher. We can't touch it all. We have to add or subtract. 2024. I hope you forgive my French pronunciation. I'm probably massacring it. Even though I did go to high school in Montreal, I didn't really learn French very well because it was a very difficult time in my life. But enough of that. We're just going to go and have a look at all of these pieces. This is probably the first time I've seen of her work that's kind of like a wall work, and it's two-dimensional. And there's a lot of like really personal, sort of like folk assemblage objects here. Like, for example, like this almost like a little door, a hinged door of a cabinet or something. And then you look at this piece here that you might be able to find in a thrift store. A bit of folk art. Oh, I think it's a candlestick. It's a wooden candlestick. And then you have almond oil here, which has been half used. And there's this door handle over here that could have belonged to some sort of like piece of furniture. This is quite interesting too. It almost looks like, to me anyways, like an altar. I like to sort of like focus on that a little bit. And the middle part is, I believe, made of metal. And it almost looks like pieces of wood that is kind of like reminiscent of tramp art, you know, because of the texturing and because of the entire sort of like way of how it was actually sort of like put together. So this is the vantage point for that piece over there. Let's just put it there. You really have to go up close, and I hope I was able to do that for you. So this one is l'érotisme du ventriloque, the erotic ventriloquist. So this is the type of work that I'm very familiar of hers. There's a lot of sort of like suggestion of figuration, especially when you look at, let's say, this one, which tends to sort of look like a face or even like a bust of something like that. This one has almost a sense of like eroticism about it. You know, it's almost like black leather, latex type of sadomasochistic thing. But when you look at it from here, there's this sort of like almost like an Art Deco-ish type of head that's being sort of like suggested, but there's also this sexuality about it. And this one is so beautiful and luscious. The entire form, there's a sinuousness about it. You know, there's a certain sort of like sense of fluidity of form in terms of the sculpture. And this entire table seems to be kind of like a variations of busts, you know, like sort of like busts of men and women all throughout the ages. And this one is a hat block, of course. So there's always this sense of the figure that figures into her work, which I find very, very fascinating, very, very interesting. And this one has this sort of like Victorian dome that covers this sort of like, almost like a psychedelic type of marbled papers, you know? I was trying to sort of like find the right words, and I was kind of like getting a bit of a blank. And then there's these pieces here that are more like pieces of brick that are put on top of each other. But, you know, I mean, you have to sort of like look at it as a collective. Like I'm just gonna go over here and see that. So that's what that looks like. It's on top of a table. So let's look at number 6 here, which is beauté in adresse, unaddressed beauty, which is made of hydrocal, cement, fortan, acrylic, and metal clamp, which I think is actually based on her mother's carving earlier on when we saw it, the one that was actually made in 1960. And it's kind of reproduced in multiples and installed as a sculpture. It's a very tall sculpture with clamps on each end and also a supporting beam in the middle. Go over here, and then we're gonna go to number 7, and this one is called Se chatouiller soi-même, tickle yourself softly, hydrocal, cement, sodium bicarbonate pigments. There's a sort of like totemic, almost Brancusi-like sort of like system employed in here, but it's not as rigid as Brancusi would have it. You know, Brancusi is more into sort of like a very sort of minimal, sort of like boxy type of sculptures, but this one is very kind of figurative, biomorphic sensibilities. Even the color of the stone is flesh. It suggests that sort of like evidence of having the figure being involved in the creation of this work, which is Il s'agit de décrire une poussée plutôt qu'une intention. This is to describe a push rather than an intention, and it's made of polymer clay. We're gonna go in really, really close to this. The coloration of it has this sort of like 70s vibe. I don't know. Do you feel it? Are you feeling it? The 70s vibe of this piece. I'm looking at it on my camera and I'm looking at it up close. And there's this sort of like sense of a textile pattern that's very sort of like 70s inspired, because 70s are, you know, you have this color palette of ochres and very, very sort of like macrame earth colors type of thing. And then the last piece we're going to look at is, and this is a carte mentale, il faut reboter ce pouvoir autant que possible. Mind map, I need to shave this power off as much as possible. And we're going to go closer, of course, because this is actually, let's see now, it's wood, canvas, mesh fabric, hydrocal, cement, fortan. It's a bunch of different types of materials. And this one, I believe, the jug-like structure is made of carved wood. And then there's, I believe this might be a record. I think it's a 45 RPM record. And then you have this, which is sort of like a, an anchor for a rope used in shipbuilding. And then you have this barbecue bag, as well as this skillet, which during the talk, she did mention that this is a skillet that she's used for about 20 years. And she decided to incorporate it in this work. And then there's this other piece over here, which kind of reminds me of vertebrae, like almost like a spine. So there's this canvas work, there's wood, there's textured wood. This looks like it's a painting. And it's the first time I've seen a wall work of hers. And it's quite a treat. There was also mention during the talk about pairs. You look at this work, there are a pair of wall works right over there. There's a pair of totems, which is one is over there and one is over here. And then there's two piles of mallets over there as well. And it's kind of interesting that she had sort of like came up with that sort of like pairing system of twinning them. It's almost like something that you may want to compare one with the other. So I think from sort of like thinking about this work, a lot of the work that Valérie has done over the past few decades, well, at least I would say a couple of decades, has more to do with figuration. And it's really more about figuration in the sense of the figure and how it's actually being sort of like used from the classical times of the Romans to the Greeks, right down to the Renaissance, right down to contemporary in terms of like Henry Moore, for example, or like Brancusi, and the totemic in Brancusi, for example, and the curvatures and the figurative sort of like suggestions in Henry Moore. But then again, you have to also look at the entire history of French, Canadian, even Quebec art. When you look at, let's say, the work of perhaps Irene Wittom, or from like the 90s to 2000s, and then just going on from a lot of like photography that went over in Montreal during the 90s. That's all kind of like informing this entire sort of sensibility, plus also dealing with, let's say, the French-Canadian sort of like religious wooden iconography wood carving traditions of that area, which is very prevalent. And also looking at this, almost sort of like sensing that sort of like entire history of Quebec art making traditions. But also, most importantly, when you're looking at the figurative, it's also a matter of actually sort of like thinking about this body of work as more sort of like not really external figuration, but more like internal figuration in terms of like there's evidence of things are being touched, things are being used. When you look at this sort of like bottle of almond oil, it's half used. And then when you look at the skillet over there in that painting, it's been used. So there's this sort of like evidence of the figure, evidence of a human being, sort of like touching all of these objects and incorporating them into a work of art. So I will end it at that, and I hope you enjoyed this tour of Valérie Blass's work here at Catriona Jeffries Gallery. If you did, you can like this video, you can subscribe to the channel, you can share this on your social media outlets, and on that note, thank you so much for engaging with me. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat. You have a great day, and I hope art informs your life, and I hope perhaps I'll see you again next week. Goodbye.